All right, welcome everyone to the Introduction to Jira Align webinar. I'm Vicki Murphy. I am a Jira Align specialist, certified safe practice consultant, and Atlassian certified professional with Valiantus. We here at Valiantus are a platinum solutions partner with Atlassian, and I will tell you a little bit more about the services we offer and what we do later on in this webinar. Today, I am also joined by my colleague, Kristen. She is going to be throwing some helpful links in the chat and helping out with the Q&A. Little bit of what's on the agenda for today. So we're about to wrap up this introduction here. Then we're going to get into some concepts around Jira Align. There's just a few good topics to cover via some diagrams using the slide deck here before we actually get into the live demo of the tool. But we will spend the majority of this session in the tool walking through that demonstration. At the end, we will have some time for Q&A. So if you have any questions as we're going along, please put them in the Q&A panel in Zoom, and we'll answer as many as possible at the end of the hour. Let's go ahead and jump in. So starting off with the overall positioning of Jira Align, it does have a little bit of a different positioning than the other Atlassian tools that you may be aware of. Jira Align is designed for organizations that have implemented or are implementing a framework for scaled planning. Some popular ones are in the Agile ecosystem around SAFe or Spotify. But in general, we need to have some type of scaled planning practice to leverage the majority of Jira Align. In fact, whenever we start talking to customers who are looking to do an implementation of Jira Align, we have found that usually they are most successful and find it the easiest path to start any type of transformation around their process a little bit prior to actually implementing Jira Align. So if you are following something like a SAFe framework, going through one PI planning process, we see leading to the most successful implementations. And that has a couple of reasons behind it. First, changing your process and your tooling can be a lot for your end users. So if they don't have the bandwidth to attend several training sessions and to adapt to this new way of working, splitting them up can be helpful. Also, there's a lot of decisions to make whenever you're configuring Jira Align, and they often revolve around our process. And so if we have been through some of that process previously, it can just help speed up those decisions that you need to make when you're in the tool. Jira Align, if you watch any demos of Jira Align, you're going to hear the phrase that Jira Align is a big tool, and that is accurate. It is actually designed to be a big tool for large organizations. Atlassian's metric that they throw around this is it's really designed for organizations who have 500 developers or more. And because it is this large tool with a lot of functionality, it does come at a higher price point than the other Atlassian tools. If you feel that you might be in a bit of a smaller organization and may not be ready for Jira Align yet, there are still lots of options available in the Atlassian ecosystem to help you achieve really what we're trying to achieve with Jira Align, which is really helping us connect our execution up to our strategy. And so I'm going to mention one of Atlassian's other tools and some resources we have around them for you in just a few slides. Jira Align, again, is really designed to help us connect our execution to our strategy across our enterprise and support the various planning activities we have at each level of our organization. So we've really seen Jira Align help organizations empower teams by making work visible across the enterprise in real time and align work to purpose, getting everyone on the same page so that we are aligning to that enterprise strategy, ensuring that what we are working on at the team and at the other levels of scale that we see here, that we're going to do a deeper dive into in just a moment, making sure that we're all aligned to that strategy. And if the work we're doing isn't aligned to that, do we need to pivot? Is it valuable? Should it be a part of our strategy? Helping bring all of those conversations to the forefront so that we can make sure that we are moving as efficiently and effectively as possible to achieve our organizational goals. Whenever we talk about connecting execution to strategy, we can really start to break that down into helping us connect people, the work they do, and time across our enterprise. And if we really think about work at a high level, that's really what it boils down to. What work is being done, who is doing it, and in what time frame are they doing this in? And so Jira Align has hierarchies around all of those topics natively built into the tool. And then as we start to input our own data, we start to connect all of those around the enterprise. So over here on the left in the white words, we see the people and we see the work that they are doing, or what we would call those work items really in the tool over here on the right. So at the top, we have our enterprise. So this is going to be that high level strategy that is being set, often set by our C-suite or executive leaders. Below that, we get into that portfolio level. And this is when we start to break that strategy down into broad themes that might take a year, multiple years to accomplish, and then further down into more tangible, actual large initiatives, or if you're following the SAFE framework, you may call this a portfolio epic, we are going to deliver over multiple PIs or quarters and using multiple groups of people. We then break that down into our program. You can think of this as the team of teams. You might have heard it called squad of squads, agile release train, but out of the box, it's called the program layer in Jira Align. This is where we're going to start delivering our features, those actual deliverables that can be accomplished in one program increment or quarterly increment by one program or team of teams. And then that program will break that down into their stories and tasks where they're planning those out. If they're a Scrum team, planning those out into their sprints. If they are more of a Kanban team, then trying to go through that weekly throughput and weekly planning. And so we already talked a little bit about the time boxes, but you can see that they are represented in the tool. When we talk about a strategic snapshot, that's an ability to compare our strategy year by year. We can set up program increments or quarters. And then we have, when you see anchors here, that really means sprints and releases as well. As I'm going through this, if this terminology doesn't necessarily match what your organization uses, that is okay. The terminology in Jira Align is customizable. I'm going to be using the terms that you see on the screen here during my demo, but any of them that are on this screen are actually customizable within the tool. So we can make this match your process. So it's, again, easier adoption for your end users. Off to the right here, you see some business vectors, some of which we will get into today. We do have the ability to start tagging work with products, OKRs, budgets, in order to start to get that broader picture of the actual work that we are delivering, how it might impact our outcomes as an organization, our goals, or the products that we are trying to deliver as well. This slide also starts to introduce an important topic of Jira Align layering on top of a team tool. So just a little bit of history here. Jira Align did not start as an Atlassian product. It actually started as a tool called AgileCraft. And when it was AgileCraft, everyone worked within the same system. But in, I believe it was 2019, Atlassian acquired Jira Align, acquired AgileCraft and turned it into Jira Align. And in doing so, they took an evaluation of the tool and found that that team layer, their tool Jira software had far more functionality for teams. And we totally stand by that. The ability to use Agile boards, filters, dashboards, in the wide marketplace that can help you connect to other team tools like code repositories, pipelines, etc., really makes Jira Align shine for that team level. With the introduction of tools like advanced roadmaps, which I'll talk about briefly a little bit more in a moment, we did get the ability to start tracking work a little bit higher above that team level. But whenever we start to try and coordinate multiple teams of teams, multiple portfolios, and really get into that enterprise layer, that's where Jira Align really shines. It has the ability to help us connect, up to really hundreds of teams we've seen it used for, up into that enterprise where organizations with hundreds of thousands of employees and dozens, if not hundreds of Agile teams are able to coordinate that work across the enterprise. Just some good to knows about Jira Align. It does have one add-on. This is this is called Enterprise Insights. It is a database or a data lake for Jira Align. It is an Atlassian product, so you can license it directly through them. And what this allows you to do is to connect your Jira Align data to a BI tool of choice. So we've seen this connected to Power BI, to to Tableau. And now with the introduction of Atlassian Analytics, you can also easily connect into that. So if you're an Atlassian Cloud Enterprise customer for Jira or JSM or Confluence even, you can have Jira Align connect into Atlassian Analytics. And a big advantage to that is, one, that is another Atlassian product just in the Atlassian ecosystem. And also the Atlassian team has built some out-of-the-box templates to work with whenever you are connecting Jira Align into analytics. Jira Align is a real area of focus for Atlassian, so they are frequently providing updates and introducing new functionality, several of which have rolled out over the last 6 months or so, and so we'll take a look at those today. Just a few months ago, they fully launched their new navigation user interface, so if you've seen a demo of the tool that was over a year old, you may have seen it in the legacy UI. So what you see today may be a little bit different. This has brought Jira Align closer to the look and feel of the rest of the Atlassian platform. We also have the introduction of milestones for most of our work items that can be displayed on our roadmap view. We have a new capacity planning module, so we'll take a tour of that today. And Atlassian continues to make improvements to their API and their connector with Jira. So connecting Jira and Jira Align it has become smoother, and we have more connectivity. As we start talking about Jira Align, a lot of customers start to ask, well, what does an implementation of Jira Align really look like? Our initial implementation, we recommend doing a single program, so a single team of teams. It's usually 3 to 5 Agile teams. This typically takes around 3 to 6 months to complete. And throughout that time, we're going through these general phases. So some discovery and planning. What are you doing today? How do you want to work tomorrow? What processes are you following? How aligned are those processes across the organization? And also doing discovery into your tools. And so often we spend sometimes up to 2 to 3 months with customers, really just making sure that their team tool, Jira, or there's also an option to connect to Azure DevOps if that's needed for your organization. Making sure that those team tools are configured to be consumed by Jira Align takes a bit of effort. We then go into a configuration phase. We do training right before we go into a launch of Jira Align. Typically, that's going to be around that big room or PI or quarterly planning event. And then after that, we're starting to expand into more programs and into the portfolio level. So after that first initial 3 to 6 months, we just start bringing more and more people in. That typically can be done at a quicker pace because we've made a lot of those configuration decisions. We've got templates and Jira ready to go. People maybe have already been through training, and so we can start to move at a faster pace. Really quick before we get into the live demo, if as we've been talking, you've started to feel like maybe Jira Align is a little further in your future than you may have been anticipating, you can always start getting ready for Jira Align by leveraging the functionality in Jira, especially using the plans or formerly advanced roadmaps and formerly portfolio for Jira functionality. This is really a great tool for growing Agile organizations that are needing to do that cross-team planning, wanting to connect your Agile team work or your execution up to your strategy. You can do in Jira with advanced roadmaps. Primarily, where we start to see the difference between this functionality and Jira Align is that in advanced roadmaps, you really just work off of this timeline view. It has a lot of functionality. You can view it as a calendar, view it a couple different ways. But when we get into Jira Align, that's when we have a lot more ability to start connecting things like objectives and key results, dependencies, risks, and several more powerful visualizations for this cross-team, cross-program planning. We do actually do a different webinar about every 6 weeks called our PPM/SPM, so Project Portfolio Management or Strategic Portfolio Management in Atlassian, and it focuses on really all of the popular options that are out there, including plans. Jira Align is mentioned at a high level, as well as a couple other popular apps. So if you are looking for a smaller starting place, I recommend you check out that webinar. There's also recordings of it on YouTube, and Kristen kindly put the link to register in the chat. All right, and with that, we're going to jump into Jira Align. All right. So this is what Jira Align looks like. Again, if you've looked at it previously over a year ago, it has a different look and feel these days, but we really welcome that change. It just is bringing Jira Align closer and closer to the rest of the Atlassian platform. I'd like to start off by talking about the navigation of the tool first, just so you can see what that looks like, but also because it really starts to bring that concept that we saw on that hierarchy diagram into reality. And so I like to use that diagram kind of mentally to map out how Jira Align really is relating all of these topics. And so we navigate using this top navigation panel. We have a home button. It looks like this. It gives you quick links to things you have favorited or to places you've recently been. Then we start to get into those layers of scale. So if we think about that left side of that pyramid diagram, the people side, we start off with the enterprise. You'll notice, unlike the next few buttons, there's no drop-down menu here. And that's because we're just talking about one enterprise. So you just have one enterprise layer for the whole organization. Again, thinking about we're trying to bring together all of our execution up to our high-level strategy. And so we want to be bringing it all together into one place. From there, we start to get into the portfolio, program, and team layers. All of these are going to have drop downs, and that's because we may have multiple portfolios. We will almost certainly have multiple programs and probably, again, dozens, if not hundreds of teams in here. And so we can use these drop downs to make the selection of the specific teams we want to be viewing information for. In Jira Align, when we do this, we call it setting the context. And so it's essentially saying, I want to go view all of the data for this specific portfolio or this specific program. And it's going to essentially apply a filter to the data that you are looking at. And so you'll see me jump around using these menus a lot today. Again, there is a product module within Jira Align. It is essentially the ability to get an orthogonal slice of your data. So outside of your typical standard work item hierarchy, we can start tagging work with our products to actually start to see a more product-centric view. We also have the ability to use custom rooms for the exact same purpose. A similar functionality, just a little bit more flexible in that it allows us to tag work items with multiple products. So a couple different options there. I'm going to go ahead and jump in just to continue. Let's see, we'll jump into the mobile program here. Whenever we jump into any of these areas, we then start to leverage the left-hand panel here for further navigation. At the top of that panel, we'll see the selection that we made for that team. But whenever we're talking about setting the context, we're also talking about that time piece. So all of these work items, we're not only tagging with who is doing this work, but we're also tagging with that third element of time. And so we use this left-hand sidebar to select that time increment. I've set this up to be a program increment. Again, you could call this quarterly increment, planning increment, whatever terminology works for you. But to really understand our data and to really leverage most of the visualizations in Jira Align, we're going to also be making that time selection. This is a little preview to some of the functionality we'll cover earlier, landing me here in the program room. This is really a dashboard for this tier. And then I have all of my other modules available as well. Up at the top here, we have all of the popular modules. That's going to be our primary focus for today, but we will jump into some of the more items, other work items we may be managing, and reports as well. Just to wrap up the navigation at the top here, we can easily jump to pages that we have starred. So off to the left here, you'll see we can favorite a room or any of the modules, and they will show up here with the search bar. We also have an items drop-down menu. I love showing this because this just, again, brings into perspective that hierarchy that we are talking about. So we have our themes, our initiatives, capabilities, and so on, as well as other objects here. So similar to any of our other Atlassian products, we also have a create button right next to this where we are able to create any of those work items. Under this items drop-down menu, this is to sort of sidestep that context setting. So if you want to see all of the themes, all of the initiatives, features, etc., for the entire organization without actually narrowing it down to a specific time or specific group of people, you can use this items drop-down as well. Off to the right here, we are able to do a basic search within Jira Align, so we can search for keywords or work item IDs as well. So if I type in a keyword, it shows me all of the potential option or matches here. We do have in-app notifications. These are specific to Jira Align. They currently don't bring in other Atlassian cloud products, but all of our Jira Align notifications will be here. There are also email notifications that go out as well. One area, so whenever we're talking about Jira Align, we really start to heavily talk about the idea of process and tools hand in hand. And so if you are following any specific process, you can utilize the checklist functionality in the tool to start to provide recommendations of how you want your teams to use the tool. And so this just allows people to come in and say, okay, I'm an RTE or I'm about to do PI planning. What do I need to make sure I have in place? You can write your own steps and also provide links to different modules in Jira Align. So you can say, I want you to review the backlog, and it's going to help them jump directly to the backlog. Really, really great. Not only is this great for a new implementation where we might be guiding people through a new process, but I see this being used by folks who have used the tool for years and years, just because it's helpful to help everyone. We're constantly context switching. Just make sure we've gone through all the right steps before we go into a ceremony, an event, anything like that. We do have a help button. So this is a contextual help button. It is going to show you the documentation for the specific module you are on. This works all throughout Jira Align, including in the admin screens as well. This is incredibly useful. Again, this is a big tool. As someone who has worked in this tool for years, I've helped customers implement this tool. I train on this tool constantly. There's still sometimes things that pop up that I need to jog my memory about. How we configure a setting or something like that, or what a report is really showing us. And so this is super helpful. When you talk about reports in the tool, this documentation will tell you any prerequisites you need to have in place, what data it's looking at, how to interpret the report. So super helpful piece of the tool here. And then we have our settings and then our personal profile. So that's really the navigation bar. I'm going to go ahead and jump into the enterprise tier, and we're going to really just work our way down. And whenever we're talking about these different modules, we're really talking about using them for either planning out our work or reporting on our work after we've done that planning process and we start the execution. And so those are the two real themes alongside, just the general purpose of connecting our execution up to our strategy. How are we using that data? We're using it to plan out our work or either to monitor that execution and report on it. All right, here I am at the enterprise tier. And I'm going to start in the strategy room. Each tier within Jira Align has its own room. Think of a room as a dashboard. It's going to come with preset modules or widgets on it, but really it's going to show a collection of data, again, all across the system, especially here at the enterprise layer, trying to give you a highlight that Jira Align is really expecting people working at this tier to need. And so at the enterprise tier here, I'm going to collapse my sidebar. In the strategy room, at the very top, we have our mission, vision, and values. And so these are always really those top tier. You can think of them loosely as goals, but it really is most commonly showing the mission, vision, and values of your entire organization. Usually we put these in once and then we sort of set it and forget it, if you will, but it's just helpful to keep everyone aligned to who we are and what we're trying to accomplish. I liken this to, when we all went into the office every day, these types of things might be posted on the walls for us. Now we can just have it here in the tool. I'm going to keep going down, and then we'll talk about the right-hand side. In the middle is what we have. We have what we call the strategy pyramid. And the strategy pyramid is one of the most popular views of Jira Align. And it just really starts to show us how all of our work is feeding up again into those mission, vision, and values. So at the top, that MVV, mission, vision, values. And then below that, we have the rest of our hierarchy. You'll notice that this is split into two. So on the right-hand side are all of those work items that we've been talking about, our themes, our epics, our features. But on the left-hand side, we start talking more about outcomes. So here we are able to not only track that deliverable execution work that is often going to be quite technical, especially when we're talking about our epics or initiatives and our features here. Those are going to be those more technical deliverable slices of work for our overall solution that we're trying to deliver. On the left-hand side, you can think of this as more, what are those business outcomes? So yes, we're going to complete all of these features or all of these epics, but how does that help us achieve our overall organizational goals? And so we can set our objectives to represent more of that outcome-focused point of view of how are we going to increase ROI? How are we going to increase downloads of our product, sales of our product, hits on our website, whatever that more business focused metric that we are trying to track, we can input that into the tool and then say, how are we going to deliver that through our actual work items? And so you can kind of think of this as a dual hierarchy. Both serve as a hierarchy. So we will link our features up to our epics, up to our themes. We can link program objectives up to portfolio, up to the next level of goals here. But they also link horizontally here. So we can link our portfolio objectives to our epics or initiatives, and likewise at the program level. As we're talking about goals, there are also 3 other layers of goals that you can enable here. And you can also customize the terms of all of them. So if yearly goals doesn't speak to you in your process, you like to use, North Stars or annual goals, we can change that. But we can also layer a few, 3 more layers of goals here. And so I've seen that if some organizations have things like strategic pillars, those may not necessarily be themes. We may have yearly goals that feed into them. We can enable that layer here. And so not only do we see how the hierarchy starts to fit together, but we see a count of all of the work items in that tier. This starts to show us, this is showing for the specific time period that I selected at the top, which is just a collection of all of my PIs for this year. We'll also start to show us misaligned work. So where we are pulling in work that is not associated with that time box, but is associated with an objective or a goal that's in that time box. So starting to show us, hey, you're planning on delivering work that's going to achieve this outcome that you're saying we're going to achieve this year, but your planning isn't matching on both sides of this hierarchy. I'm going to scroll down. We also have a lot more insight into our OKRs in this room. And so I'm going to come back to the heat map. Here we have our OKR tree. So going all the way up to our strategic goals here, all the way down to our team objectives. It looks like I have a terminology mishap here. This should be yearly goals. Probably running a test in the background at some point messed that up. But if we click into this, just to give you insight into what an OKR looks like, we can set our overall objective. I'm going to collapse these things just to make it a little easier to walk through. Give it a name, usually that big what. So become a market leader, increase sales, whatever that big what may be. Often we write these as sort of that SMART objective, trying to put a time frame around it. Description, lots of other fields we can collect. Time boxes, how does this fit into our hierarchy? Who is really working on this? Who owns this? Who's contributing to it? And much, much more here. If you are following the SAFE framework and you're doing the value score for OKRs, it also has fields around that. So we can set that overall value we expect to deliver and then what we actually delivered here. And there's some reports around that in the system as well. After we set this big, what are we trying to achieve? We can then say, what are the metrics we're going to use to measure if we have achieved this? And that's our key results. So every every objective can have really unlimited key results, but realistically, we want this to probably be 2 to 5 at max. Just kind of from a process perspective, not a technical tool limitation here. We can set the summary and then choose from these types of metrics. So percentage count, currency, net promoter score, and also a custom score that you can customize. And from there, we then are able to set what is our overall goal, where are we at today, and then we can update this current count through a check-in process. So on whatever cadence you want to set, people can come in, usually that owner of the goal or objective can come in and provide an update here. That gives us an overall score. So this is taking that goal, that baseline, and that really that baseline and that current into account of achieving that goal. So where are we at on a scale of 0 to 100% or 0 to 1 as the decimal form here. As we add key results to this objective, it then is going to give us an overall objective score. So it's going to average all of those key result scores together. Just have one here, so they're both 0.8. From there, we can then say, okay, this is how we're going to measure if we've achieved this, but what are we going to actually do to deliver this outcome? And that's where our aligned work items come in. So depending on the layer of objective you created, determines what work items you can actually link. So for this portfolio objective, I can link themes and epics here. And I can see some progress information here as well as up at the top right. You can also go even further and link dependencies, risks, impediments, and even have child objectives here. So that's what an objective looks like. So it does serve sort of that formalized OKR format, but you can also, there's a lot of flexibility in how we use this. So we often leverage this when we just need to track some other type of kind of outcome-based information, whether it's a formal OKR or not, this could be leveraged. And then here in the strategy room, you think about at that enterprise tier, we may not need to be digging into what are the specific features we're delivering, but really what are the outcomes that we're achieving. So we have a lot of metrics around that. We have this full OKR tree where we can do a deep dive into those. And then we have the overall OKR heat map. So taking that full time span into consideration, averaging all of the scores together at each tier. We can use this just as that gut check of where we at in achieving these objectives. Keeping in mind that while Jira Align really brings a lot of what I like to call communication moments to the forefront. So it's still expecting us to show up with knowledge of where we're at in our year and if these numbers are really good or potentially concerning. Up at the top right, we just have general progress around all of our work items. And then again, looking at those work items that are connected to those goals or objectives, how are we going at achieving those? So that's a strategy room, popularly used. I'm going to skip down, and also at this level, we're often talking about our overall roadmap. And to view the roadmap, I'm going to need to make some selections of time over here. The roadmap does what you would expect. It helps us plot out that duration of our work items. We can use this to view several different tiers of work individually or multiple tiers at once, such as the feature by epic. That's my personal favorite here. And then we can choose to view this based on that multiple time cadences. So we can use it for our PIs and sprints, as you see here, or for more of that traditional calendar view as well. So here I see all of my epics, or you might call these initiatives. I can expand to see multiple tiers of work. And then I can see progress as well if I hover over this. This is interactive. We can move these bars around, the start and due dates around, and we can also customize what columns we're viewing. On each bar, we are also able to visualize milestones. So we'll talk about milestones, how we set those in just a moment, but we can visualize them for each work item here on the roadmap. You can view the start and the due date here. And also those objectives. So this little flag that you see here, or maybe down here as an example, these are going to be our objectives. And so as we're connecting those to our work items, we can also keep track of them on something like the roadmap here. And then these little check boxes here are going to be our releases. At the top, you'll notice there is a sync button. So if we make changes to those time boxes, we are going to be able to do some planning here and then choose to sync it back. That's quite similar to Atlassian's or to Jira's advanced roadmaps functionality. I think everybody's probably familiar with using a roadmap. It's used for those traditional purposes of planning and understanding our plan, but also I often see this being used to help cast the vision. And so as we are setting our priority and setting the work that we are trying to accomplish, we can use this to help communicate that vision to our organization and down that hierarchy. Right. And with that, I'm going to jump into our portfolio tier and talk about, let's see, which one do I want? The backlog. And so we have a backlog of work at every tier. So we have a strategic backlog. We also have a backlog for our themes, our initiatives or epics, our features as well, even down into that team layer. So at the team layer, while we can see that information here in Jira Align, we expect that to be really managed over in the team tool like Jira or potentially Azure DevOps. I'm going to talk about the Epic backlog here, but just know it really works the same at every single layer. So for our themes, our features, our stories, we really work with the backlog the same way. We can view the backlog for all time. So if we're trying to set that overall priority for the entire portfolio here, I can view it a PI at a time. And so I have it set to a PI. We'll just go ahead and continue with that. And the backlog is used to provide that overall priority primarily. And so we can do a lot of filtering. We can control what all columns we see here. We even have options into what these little labels tell us. We can see right here. But the big thing that we're doing is coming in here and typically dragging and dropping or potentially using the right click functionality to move this to the top or bottom to provide that priority. So when our teams come in here and they start to do that planning for the upcoming quarter or program increment, they're able to understand what's at the top of our list here. I'm going to go ahead and actually open up one of these epics or initiatives, and then we'll take a look at a couple other visualizations we have in the backlog. So this is what a work item looks like in Jira Align. It has this right-hand pop-out. We saw it with the objectives. Now we see it with this actual epic. And several of the work items are going to have multiple tabs. So we're just going to hit the highlights of the epics here. Everything has the typical fields like description and type. Every work item in that typical hierarchy, so our theme down to our stories, is going to have a contained in section. So right here from the actual work item, you're able to visualize that full hierarchy upwards. So we can see, in this case, what is the parent? But if we go a layer down, what is the parent and the grandparent? And if we go even a layer down, we get those 3 layers above. And these are all links, so we can click into them to view more information. When we're talking about that epic or initiative level, we're often talking about work that's completed by multiple groups of teams, so multiple programs. So we can set a primary and additional programs. And if we scroll down, often also talking about completing this over multiple quarters or program increments. So we can associate multiple PIs here. There's several options for prioritization within Jira Align, but as the tool was originally created with the SAFe framework in mind, while you don't have to be following the SAFe framework, you will see several functionalities that are geared towards that. One of those being weighted shortest job first or WSJF prioritization. This is an actual module. WSJF takes into account 4 different metrics or 4 different inputs to provide a calculation for priority. And so in here, we can use these different tabs to indicate what each score is, and then it will give us the calculation at the end. You can then display this in the backlog view to help you with that prioritization. At the bottom of every work item, you may see more fields under the full details, but you will also see the hierarchy downwards. So here I will see all of the child work items. Over on the right, I'll start to see progress information. And I like to highlight this because whenever we're talking about progress or metrics in Jira Align, even though I'm here at the portfolio layer, this is really showing me information going all the way down the hierarchy to our teams. So I like to use the phrase, the data you're looking for is at the team level. This progress information is super valuable, but if I don't have teams working in their team tool, creating, estimating, and moving work through their workflow, I'm not going to really be able to leverage this information because we don't have that connected hierarchy. Again, connecting our execution to our strategy is the biggest thing that we are doing here in Jira Align, and we really can't fake it. So you can't just turn this on, put in your epics and then expect that connectivity to happen to our execution. We have to be actively linking work up the hierarchy appropriately. At the top, we see a lot of further progress information as well. We have a lot of different tabs. Some are more useful than others. The intake tab is a customizable form for when you're bringing work in, if you want to help people provide that business case to you. The value tab can have a scorecard, essentially, also can be used for more prioritization, or you can also completely turn this off and just use some of the other functions. All of our work items can have up to 20 milestones. And so each milestone can have a description, a start and due date, a state, and a category as well. And then we can display these on the roadmaps as we saw. The spin tab is also a highlight of the portfolio level. This is often where we're starting to do that high level budgeting for these large epics or initiatives. Again, this is where we start to really need that connectivity up our hierarchy. All of this information is great. It's often a real point of interest for organizations, but it is all actually coming off of our stories, if you see here. I also want to just mention that Atlassian does not intend Jira Align to be any type of budgeting tool of record. It is that high level information. And there is a lot of documentation around the formulas that they're using to gather this information as well. We can even click into any of these calculations and it gives us a deeper dive all the way down to just seeing each individual story. In this case, it tells us the full calculation as well. Close out of that. And lastly, we have our forecast tab. So for each work item, we can provide a forecast of how much effort we expect each team to put towards this for each program increment or quarterly increment. And I'm going to next jump to the other another module called our forecast and capacity module. In the backlog, we also are able to visualize this as more of a Kanban view. And so this can also be very helpful to understanding not only what our work items are, but the overall state that they are in. And so we have a couple different options for this, but they all really work as just a Kanban board. This is interactive, as you would expect, similar to Kanban boards over in Jira. Right. Let's jump down to that forecast module. So after we go through that prioritization of work, we likely need to start understanding who is going to do that work and do they have the capacity to do that work. And so we have the forecast and capacity modules here that can help us with that. This is the same as that forecast tab. It's really just an aggregate view. So it's the full list of work for this PI. You can apply the backlog rank here. And as you start to breach a team's capacity, it's going to turn red. And then we can really set that team's capacity under the capacity module. And so we can view this at several different layers at the portfolio, at the program tier, for our features, for our epics or initiatives. And what this really allows us to do is do a dive into our different programs here. And for each team, set how much work we expect them to do for that upcoming quarter. It then gives us the available capacity here. That rolls up into this whole program's available capacity. And this is going to now take into account what's that forecast from that forecast module or the individual work items themselves. And then what is our capacity? I wish I could say that this was a really egregious example here, but more often than not, when we first start utilizing this functionality with customers, this is what we see. We are planning way too much work that there's no way our teams are going to be able to complete. So now we have that communication moment. What are we going to do about it? What can we take out of scope here, or how can we get more effort or capacity to free up as well? All right. And then at the top of the portfolio tier, we also have a portfolio room, which gives us that deeper dive into our epics and into our themes, as well as a nice little calendar for that PI roadmap. For here on the right, we can start to see what themes are we really working on in the quarter or quarters that we've selected, and what percentage complete are we with them. There's also an overall PI view here as well. All right, let's go ahead and jump into that program tier with the time that we have left. The program tier is most useful when we are trying to coordinate work across our multiple groups or our multiple teams. So again, that team of teams layer. And it has a lot of similar modules as that portfolio tier and even as the enterprise tiers. So you'll also notice we have a backlog, we have roadmaps, we have forecast and capacity. All of these work the same across all the different tiers. You're just talking about a different segment of work. We also introduced at the program level the program board. And the program board is used to help us plan out our work for that upcoming quarter. So here we have a simple grid view where we have each of our teams as a row and each of our sprints in that PI as a column here. I don't really know what I clicked on to make that show up. Give it a refresh real quick. As we are planning out our work, we have different work items displayed. So all of our rectangles are features. All of our plus signs here are dependencies. So we are able to create dependencies in Jira Align. I'm going to talk about that module in just a moment. As our teams are planning out their work, they can click on these different features to view more information about them, understand what stories they have linked to them, assign one or multiple teams, and choose their overall target completion date within that PI. So this starts to represent that overall plan for what we are going to execute and when. Where this takes it a step further than other solutions you may have seen around a program board is this starts to serve as a real-time report. And so not only are we able to plan out our work initially, but as we go throughout this PI, it stays up to date. And so you'll notice the different color coding that you have on this board that represents planning issues with our different work items. It can be everything from this has been marked as blocked, there's conflicts with our dependencies, we don't have any stories assigned, anything like that can represent a planning issue. And so this starts to highlight where we might be starting to slip on our plan, or if we're doing our planning process where we don't have dates lining up correctly, things like that. So not just a planning tool, but also essentially a report as we go through that PI. At the top here, you can also view those objectives at the team and the program level. As I mentioned, we can also identify dependencies. They are these little plus icons here. And dependencies represent where we are needing a different team to help us complete our feature. And before I move away from the program board, I just also want to call out that as I hover over these work items, you'll notice everything else starts to gray out. And that's because it's going to highlight anything that's linked. So not only can I see there are dependencies, I can easily see what feature they apply to as well. Let's go ahead and jump to the dependency module really quick, just so you can see what dependencies look like. Ooh, that was the wrong option. Dependencies are an actual work item in Jira Align. And so they have their own title, they have their own description, and they also represent that handshake between our different teams. So we always put in a requesting team. Who does this depend on? We give a needed by date. So when do we need this completed by? And when are we going to commit to completing it by? And then we have a whole workflow for our dependencies as well. In this grid, we can also easily see what dependencies have we requested of others, what have they requested of us. And we also have several reports around dependencies. I'll show one of my personal favorites, the dependency matrix. Being able to track dependencies in this tool is really helpful, but also being able to see a visualization like this as to where the dependencies actually exist has proven as a true highlight to this tool, because it's giving us that understanding of where could we maybe be better arranging our people, our skills, etc., to actually better complete our work. Great. Also in Jira Align, we have a risk module. So we can also track risks. Often these are identified during that PI planning process, but they can also be identified outside of that. And they have they're their own work items. So we also link these to our features or potentially to our epics, but we can indicate a lot of information about them as you see here. Jira Align follows the Rome methodology for risks. So for resolving, we can choose from our options of resolved, owned, accepted, and mitigated, and provide information as to what we did to resolve this risk so that we might be able to reuse that information in the future. Risks will not display as work items on the program board, but they will show up in the links section for our features and turn a feature yellow if they are not resolved. We do have one report around risks. It is the Rome report. Let me scroll down here. The risk Rome report shows us the risks for our PI or quarter, and then it shows it as sort of a Kanban view. So we can start to understand how are we going about managing these risks, and are we accepting too many? Are we owning too many? Are we actually taking resolution actions? And with this, we can also drag and drop to the different options. So if you're doing a Rome ceremony as part of your planning process, then you can actually pull this up as that more aggregate view. And there's some high-level reporting around some of the fields at the bottom as well. All right. The last thing that I am going to showcase is the work tree. So often organizations, we talked a lot about some of the metrics that we've seen today, and I've highlighted that a lot of that comes from connecting our work up the hierarchy and actually performing work in the tool. That takes a little bit of time to get some value out. But where we start to see immediate value are visualizations like the dependencies that we talked about, the risks, the program boards, and also being able to just see how that work all comes together. And so in views like the roadmap and in the backlog, we can see a couple layers of work. But here in the work tree, we are able to see the full hierarchy of work. So here I see my epics, and I can drill all the way down into my stories here. I have progress indication all feeding up, bottom up again from that story level. Whenever we implement this and we start to show this type of visualization and those dependency visualizations to leaders, the most common thing we hear is, I never had visibility into this. And so just getting the data in the tool, you start to get immediate value around these types of visualizations. As you start actually using the tool, those metrics start to fill in and you start to just add to the value you receive. And I know I said that was the last thing, but I forgot about the program room. And this is another big highlight of the tool. Again, when we do an implementation, we're typically starting at this program level. And so this is another really fast value area of the tool. It is a great place to bring multiple teams together to understand all of those data points we really talked about. What's our overall forecast versus our capacity going into this PI? We can input a checklist here so we can understand if we've gone through the right steps in our process. Where are we at in our PI with our sprints and just overall story acceptance? What's our overall program load here versus our capacity? Each team, what are they loaded up with? We see everyone is over 100% here. Probably not very good. What can we do about this? And then as we start going through the PI, what's our overall progress looking like? What are our dependencies? Over on the right, we can see our objectives and our risks as well. In the middle, we start to see our backlog. This is a visualization of the backlog. We can't do prioritization here, but we can see a lot about it. And where do we have misaligned or orphan stories? This is saying you have a story planned that is going to be completed after you plan to complete the feature itself. That's usually no good. And orphan stories, where do we not have our work linked up our hierarchy? At the top, we also just have a quick progress overview. We can also filter this down to an individual team. So I see this being brought up in ceremonies like Scrum of Scrum, Squad of Squads meetings, where we're seeing the aggregate view, but let's drill into each team. Maybe each Scrum Master or product owner gives an overall overview. Just doing a time check, those are the real highlights of the tool. There are other reports around things like scope change and objective progress, but really the visualizations we've shown also serve as reports. They're that real-time reporting that we are able to gather an insight into where we are today and where we're going. With that, before we get to the Q&A, just some quick information about Valiantus and some opportunities coming up around Jira Align. We are a platinum partner with Atlassian. We've been around for, I believe, 16 years. We are proud to hold all of Atlassian's certifications, including their Agile at Scale certification. We do everything really in the Atlassian or Atlassian adjacent ecosystem, I like to say. So we do implementations, migrations, training, just general support around all of the Atlassian products and the popular apps in the ecosystem. But whenever we have a need that isn't met by one of those options, we also have a full stack development team that we can pull in to help create something custom, whether it's a custom connection to one of the Atlassian tools, custom interface, or a full custom app. So yeah, here's kind of that summary and where all of our services fall into. Speaking of our training services, we do a public training class around Jira Align. So if you like what you saw here today and you want to do a deeper dive and also get some hands-on experience with Jira Align, we have a Jira Align bootcamp. It's a one-day class. Our next session is on November 6th. In this class, we put you in our demo environment that you saw me using today with some more simplistic demo data. And we take you on a tour throughout the system. You get to click along with us. We give you access to be able to create work items, manage them, understand the connection between Jira and Jira Align, and all throughout it, we also talk about implementation tips. So you can register at one of the links that Kristen threw in the chat, and also the QR code here. You can put in the code VAL20 for 20% off of that class. All right. We already did the whole demo today. So let's go ahead and go to any questions. So if you have any questions, we'll use the last 5 minutes here for our Q&A. Are links to X-ray tests visible as well? So X-ray test links are not visible within Jira Align. What I will say is typically whenever we're talking about folks who are working with X-ray tests, that's more at the team level. And we would expect all of those folks to be working in the team tool. So because you're saying X-ray, I assume you're using Jira. And so all of that is still in Jira. If you have specific work items called tests, you could sync those to Jira Align. My recommendation is anything that we are estimating and goes into our team and therefore up into our program and portfolios, velocity metrics, capacity metrics, things like that. I would recommend syncing to Jira Align. And so it kind of depends on how you have your X-ray set up and how you're treating those tests as to if it makes sense to sync that to Jira Align or not. But I guess so long as that X-ray test is an actual work item, you could sync it. Again, I would want to do some more conversation around if that makes sense or if it's just potentially creating some noise and it's simpler to not. So great question. And that really goes for any apps you might be using in Jira. A lot of times those are more team focused. And so it's best suited to leave them in Jira, and people who are working at the team level or maybe just assisting the teams in some way have access to that system. Great question. Kind of a question, it looks like, around reporting and talking about at the executive level. Do we see executives getting into Jira Align, or are they trying to view more at the reporting level? So that's a really great question that we hear a lot. It really does depend on the executive. So you do sometimes have executives who want to be in the tool, but more often than not, they are looking for more of that aggregate reporting view. And this is where we start to leverage enterprise insights. And so with that ability to connect to excuse me, with that ability to connect to BI tools, often we are using that to create some type of dashboard for those executives, whether it's Power BI, Tableau, Atlassian Analytics. That's more the visualization they're looking for. And so where Jira Align really fits in well with the Atlassian ecosystem, Atlassian's tools out of the box are really designed for the masses, if you will. And then when we need to make niche custom reports or visualizations, they leverage the ecosystem of apps. And so that's what the Enterprise Insights app is, giving us that ability to make something more custom for our executives. I think we have time for one more question. Any tips for getting started to prepare for Jira Align? Biggest thing is familiarize yourself with how Jira and Jira Align connect. There's lots of resources out there, but that's also a topic we cover in depth in our Jira Align bootcamp. And start to set up your Jira environment to work well with that. So making sure, our workflows, our boards, our fields are all following best practices for syncing to Jira Align. Start to figure out what your process is and where you plan to standardize. Start to roll that out, and then figure out what that MVP is. So any implementation can really get out of hand if we don't have a good MVP established. So where do we want to achieve quick value? Who's our pilot team? And then start talking to Atlassian or to a partner. Jira Align to purchase licenses does require some implementation services. You can go through Atlassian. You can utilize a partner like Valiantus or another Agile certified partner. And we're always happy to start that conversation and talk about what pre-work you may be able to do. All right. That brings us to our conclusion. Thank you all so much for your questions and for tuning into our webinar. If you have any follow-up questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. And the recording of this will be posted on YouTube later this week or early next week. So thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your day.